Great. Hey, thanks for joining FAA. We have a number of us on the call today, and Russ Tuttle will be presenting the Toad tips for tricks. Brianna and myself, Jason tomorrow, are on the line from Federal Sales, and we look forward to getting starting shortly here. I've got a few people on. Just give it just a minute.
I also just want to let you all know that you are not muted. So if you wanted to go ahead and mute yourselves, you can do so. And then throughout the presentation, if you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself.
Thank you everyone for joining again. We will get started in just about a minute. We see some more folks coming into the WebEx, so we'll just give it just a minute before we get started. And we do hear some kids in the background joining. No kidding. If you don't mind muting, but this is interactive, so please unmute when you have a question.
Also, just wanted to let everyone know that there is a questions and chat section on the right-hand side in the panel. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them there or unmute yourself and ask throughout the presentation. There's also a raise your hand button and a question mark button if you have questions as well. Farhana, I just wanted to let you know you are not muted, so we can hear you.
Attendee numbers are rising, everyone. Thank you again. We will go ahead and get started here. Just a quick introduction. I'm Jason Demaro from Quest Public Sector. Brianna Kiernan from Quest is on as well. We are the federal government sales leads. Russell Tuttle will be doing the presentation on Toad for SQL today, the training, the tips and tricks. And then following Russ, we will have Susan doing Foglight for Databases demo. And I'm going to turn it over to Russ to get started. So please feel free to ask questions as we go. Mute yourself, unmute yourself, use the raise your hand button, or put a question in chat, and we will get to all questions. So no further ado, Russ, take us off.
Well, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. Thank you for joining this tips and tricks for Toad for SQL Server. Someone's got their computer on. That's much better. So just please mute yourself until you have a question. As they mentioned, this will be pretty informal. We have about 14, 15 people online. So please feel free to ask questions at any time. And with that, we're gonna jump in. So on screen right now, hopefully you can see the Toad for SQL Server. And I'm on the little web page that you can connect to when you're in Toad for SQL Server, or you can always go via Google or any other browser. And Toad World has a lot of great information. We can scroll through here, and we have a nice little video online. It talks about some product highlights here. Though what's nice is some of the features that we are going to be going over today, such as the log reader, the SQL optimizer, exporting, reports, a few other things as well that will hopefully help you get a lot more out of Toad for SQL Server, some white papers. And one of the real nice things is you can always pull up the technical documentation, and you can ask questions on the forums with other Toad for SQL Server users that are external to Quest. So a lot of times that can be very helpful because they're handling real world issues and problems just like yourself. So Toad World is a very valuable resource. One of the real nice things with Toad for SQL Server here is you can be connected to many SQL Server instances at one time. For those of you new to Toad for SQL Server, the little connection box just allows you to walk through. We can connect via Windows authentication, SQL Server authentication, and a couple different Active Directory methods. And one little nice thing here is you can encrypt your connection. So if you are storing your password, that information will not be out there. And another nice little thing is if you're working with many different databases, maybe you've got your development, test, production, QA, reporting, is we can put those in different categories. So they will show up on screen with a color, whether you're a dev, prod, test, or you can create your own custom categories such as reporting. So this is very nice to just kind of let you know what you're working with at any point in time. And you can also set your connection to a default database. So if you have many databases in your SQL Server instance and you're typically working with one, you can set that as your default. So a nice few little things there when you connect on in with Toad for SQL Server. Toad for SQL Server supports many of the recent versions of Toad for SQL Server. And once you're connected on in, you will get several different screens, whether you start on the database browser and editor. And those can all be configured here. If we go to the Tools menu, and when you first load up, or if you already have Toad for SQL Server and want to go back and customize it, we go to the configuration wizard. Some of you are very familiar with Toad for Oracle, and you may have been on the presentation this morning. So you can make Toad for SQL Server look a little bit more like Toad for Oracle. You can just leave the default. You can have it line up, look a little bit more like Management Studio, so if you're very comfortable with those tools. But here I'm going to just step through quickly the custom settings. So I have mine set up with the multi-line tab so we can see all the objects. Some of you may just like a single tab, and this kind of shows you a preview of what it will look like. So you can kind of see if you like the tree view, a flat tree, or what have you. My personal preference is this multi-line tabs, but you can set it up at any time and you can modify it at any time as well. We can show the connections in here when you're in here, and sometimes people don't like that because they want more real estate. So once again, that's just up to you. So going through the connection wizard. And what's real nice is when you start up Toad for SQL Server, do you want it to open up in an editor or the Database Explorer? We'll go to the Database Explorer, and for those of you familiar with Toad for Oracle, that is essentially the equivalent to the Schema browser. So when you open a new connection, this will always open up on one of these two things in there. So with that, I've got my little Object Explorer. We can click around to the different databases. I just have a few databases here that we can look at those. In there, you can click here to get information about the various databases. And if we come up here, we can explore. So you can explore a particular object. So in here, I'm on my Quest Prod database. We can see it has 4 or 5 tables. Shows me a little bit of information about each one of those tables. And if we once again want more real estate, we can click here for the auto hide in there. So now the Object Explorer, and we have more real estate. And certainly you can mouse over at any time to get that information back. So we're on a customer table. We can see the columns in there. You can see the data. It's very nice here. From any data grid in Toad for SQL Server, you have the ability to export, which we're going to look at a little bit later, send to, all sorts of various features. If you take nothing else away from today's presentation, all Quest products, typically, especially the Toad for Oracle and Toad for SQL Server, are very right-click happy. So in this presentation, we are going to look at, we saw how to do some of the connections. We're on the Explorer window. What we're going to do in a moment is we're going to look at the ER diagram, entity relationship diagram, that will help you understand what's related in here. So regardless of whether you're a DBA, developer, some sort of technical analyst, or another role, can help you understand the relationships in there and see if your RI, your referential integrity, is at the database level, the application code level, or a mix thereof. Once we do the diagram, we will take that into our graphical query builder. Regardless of whether you're a great typist, an excellent SQL person, the graphical query builder can save you time. You don't have to type out long similar names where you can make fat finger errors. Point and click a lot of times is a nice way to get started building templates. You can do all your querying in the graphical query builder, or once you have a query kind of the way you like it, we can then take it on into the editor. Once we're in the editor, we're going to see some little features like the SQL recall, our Toad IntelliSense, and the ability to optimize your SQL within Toad for SQL Server. There are some other things we'll look at after that, such as getting session browser information, very handy for the DBAs, some performance monitoring, very lightweight here that will lead into the second part of this presentation with Susan showing Foglight, some of the ability to discover SQL Server instances right here from Toad for SQL Server, not having to rely on SQL Server Management Studio. Toad for SQL Server is not a replacement for Management Studio, but a very nice complement. It's not as bloated, it's a little easier. So when you are just writing code, pulling data, generating reports, doing a few things like that, it's nice just to stay in this simple, familiar interface. We're going to show some of the compares where we can do data compares, schema compares, server compares, as well as look at some of the underlying server storage information. So that's kind of what we're going to cover in here. Most things, we took a quick look at the file menu connecting. The edit will come more in place when we're in the editor. So some of the things here, we saw under the view connection manager, the object explorer. You can get quick thing of object details. The SQL recall, when we get into the editor, this is Toad for SQL Server automatically saves your last 500 validly executed SQL statements. So it's very easy to recall SQL that you've quickly or recently used. Code Snippets has a lot of little templates and things to take advantage of SQL's advanced functions, and a few other little things in there. But most things you'll either find on the toolbar or under the tools menu. We're going to look, as we said, the editor, the query builder, the ER diagrams. The SQL Server Discovery is a nice little wizard that you can step through. So if you've just loaded up SQL Server or you want to find new instances in your environment, new servers, you can just add in new domain names, where you want to browse through, what kind of discovery methods you want to use. Just step through here. Oops, did I not select one? We'll just select a couple there. Go through. What discovery methods are you doing? Do you want to discover by IP address or some other method? And just click through. And that's a nice thing. Many of the features in Toad for SQL Server that you may not use daily are wizard driven, so you don't need to learn a whole application. It's very easy, very forgiving. Put in some information here, just step through what it is you want to do. And your log on credentials, whether SQL Server or Windows authentication, and then we're pretty much ready to go here, and we can go ahead and discover. So it's a nice little discovery wizard built in here into the Toad for SQL Server. A few other things, this master detail browser we'll look at a little bit later, but it's an excellent way to browse, view, and edit data across related and non-related tables within your SQL Server databases. This way you can validate that the joins, the keys are working, that the data's there. We also, once we generate some data in a little bit, we're going to go through some of the export capabilities, and these things can be automated. So if you are exporting data, importing data on a regular basis, we can automate it here with the automation utility, that the automation script designer that is built right in here into Toad for SQL Server. And if you're in a dev environment or a reporting environment, we have a nice little data generator that we're going to look at. But for right now, let me just come back here. We're on AdventureWorks. I'm going to go to my Quest Prod. So we're on our Quest Prod database. I click on the tables. And so here, if I see this, and I go back to our Explorer window, I can see the columns for this particular table. We can come in here, and what's very nice, whether you're a DBA developer, you can alter these tables, you can rename structures, you can create things here. Very centralized, very easy to work with. Quickly check the data here. We can check some of the dependencies. So in this case, I'm not sure what's related to the customer table. So what I can do is I can drill down, and I can see that my customers table has a child of orders, and orders has a child of order lines, and that's the end of this hierarchy. So this isn't too complex. I can kind of understand customers as the child of orders and order lines. But sometimes there's a little bit more complex part to your database, and we'd like to see a little data diagram or an ER diagram, ER for entity relationship. So here I'm going to do a right click. And this is the one non-intuitive part of Toad, is you need to find this send to quite often. You can grab it up here out of context, or by doing the right click, we can come down in here and I'm going to say, let's create a database diagram. Now I can grab the parent table customers there, and then it will ask how many reference tables do I want to drill down on. It defaults to 1. So here we can see customers has that child of orders, but I'm now going to change it to level 2, and we can kind of drill down here as well. So as we saw before, that customers has the child of orders and orders has the child of order lines. So quickly and easily we can understand, okay, this is what I need to work with if I want to query data, understand what's related. We can save off these little ER diagrams, share them with other Toad users. You can print them off, do lots of nice things. But here, if I do a right click, what I want to do is I'm in a hurry. I want to pull some data. So I'm now just going to send this to the query builder. I could have also gone directly from here to the query builder and not gone to the database diagram step, but I just wanted to show you that in this tips and tricks. So here, when I say send to the query builder, it looks almost exactly like your ER diagram or your data diagram. We can see the customers, orders, order lines, and that. And you can always drag in more tables. If they're not related, you can drag and drop and create the joins. So here, just to create a quick little script, I'm going to say customer ID, name, balance from the customer table. I'd like order date from my orders table, and we'll take quantity and value. So down below, we can see the columns we've selected, from what table they're selected, and what database they're from. At this point in time, I can just go ahead and hit execute and the SQL statement. But if I want to look at the SQL statement before I execute, I can click on this query tab down below. And you can see just by pointing and clicking, we created a very nicely formatted, simple SQL statement in there with ANSI join syntax. And it's all ready to go. And once again, if I hit the green arrow, we've now got the data. It's on a tab that says set 1. We will keep up to the last 5 sets as you modify, re-execute this particular query. So very nice this way. If I go back to the diagram, I've got a simple query here, but I want to do more. So I click ascending, and we'll see that it put in my order by clause, and I can execute again. And now I have a couple data sets that I could compare to each other. And we can keep refining, modifying, making the query more complex. Here, I'm going to put in a little where clause. We can do a simple one where here I'm just going to pick the operator. I'm going to say where customer ID is greater than some value, and I put in a nice little value there. But we can also use subqueries in this, or you can go and take advantage of the advanced SQL functions, count distinct, min, max, things like that. But we'll keep it simple for this presentation. And I hit OK. And once again, we can see that the query now has the where clause. We can execute it. And we've got 3 data sets. And what's nice here is if I want to compare the difference between set 1 and set 3, all I have to do is do a right click. I don't need to save those off to an Excel file, a notepad file, or anything like that. I can come down in here and do my right click to compare, and I can compare set 1 to set 2. I actually have another editor open, so you could have 2 editors with the same query, modify one query and compare the differences on how changing that query affects the result sets. So a lot of nice things that you can do right here in the Graphical Query Builder. These can be saved off, reused, shared with other Toad users, used as templates, and we'll see how you can go back. If you've already created a bunch of queries, you can right-click and reverse engineer from the SQL Server editor back into the Graphical Query Builder. Once we have some data in a data grid like this, if we do a right click, some of the nice features in Toad for SQL Server, we can quickly copy rows, cells, print off things, but you'll see there's a couple little wizards here. We have this export wizard. We're going to go through that. And once you're familiar with that, you can do the quick export where we can quickly export out to Excel file, comma delimited, HTML. Maybe you just want to take it to a pivot table, do some other things. But let's go back up here to the export wizard. And one of the real nice things about the export wizard is there are multiple formats in here. So what is it that you want to export out to, whether CSV, tab delimited, select your own delimiter. One of the things that we can do is you can, if you have the permissions within your database, is create a new table so you can play around with that. Most people, it seems like, are exporting out to Excel. So when I click on Excel, and we have the default here to include SQL statement. This is very nice. Sometimes you may want to toggle it off depending on what you're doing with your export result set. But what this will do is it's going to put your data in sheet 1 and put the SQL statement in sheet 2. So if you're pulling this data off to Excel and giving it to an analyst, a data scientist, somebody else, and then they maybe want you to pull the data again at a later time point, you'll know exactly what SQL you used. Or if you need to rerun it for whatever reason, you don't have to try and remember. If we step through the little wizard with next, one of the nice things is you might have 20 columns selected in your query, but only want to export some. You can certainly choose that. And sometimes you may want to be changing. Maybe you're going from SQL Server to MySQL for the export. We can come in here and you can change the date formats as you export it out to Excel or some other formats. You have a lot of nice little control of the data in here. As we step through this, where do we want to export that out to? So here I've got my little Toad export, and I'm just going to put SS Toad export, so I know this is my SQL Server. You can set it to overwrite each time. You can have it append, timestamp it. And this way you can keep, the history of your exports in sheet 1, 3, 5, 7, as well as each one of the SQL statements if you're modifying that SQL statement. We're going to export out to Excel. It just tells us what step. And this next one is a little bit critical here. What's real nice is we are going to export the data. And if we're just doing a one-time export, we'll leave this. If we want to do the ability to automate it or open it again, we can save the template, come out here, and where do we want to put it? I'm just going to put it on my desktop. We'll call it SQL Server Export Template. And hit save. And now when I hit finish, we've saved that template. It's down here processing, and now it told me that I quickly exported out 1,000 rows, and I can validate that here by clicking on the file name. We have a link to Excel. Here's my Excel export, all ready to manipulate, play around, send off to someone. And we can see in sheet 1 here, I've got the information, and on the SQL statement tab here, I've got my SQL statement that's ready to copy and paste, so I can give this to someone else, create that, and they can play around with it and use it themselves. So a lot of nice little features here in the data grid. Now, we also have the ability to create very nice reports in here. So instead of doing the export or the quick export, you'll see right below it, it says send to. And I'm going to do this data report designer. So when I click on that, this will open up, and we're going to just do a standard report. I will click next. We can pick and choose which columns. So maybe we don't want everything that was in the query in our report. That is okay. And maybe I didn't group in my query. I can do that here as in my report wizard. I'm going to group on order date, and you can nest those groupings. So we'll click through, and if you know you're ready, you can finish. You don't need to go through every step of the wizard. One nice feature that we have in here is anything that's a number field, we can automatically create calculated fields. So you don't need to worry about coding those, how to do that. So maybe we just want to find out what the average quantity is in this particular report, or the min balance, something like that. So here when I click next, we've got different ways we can have your report laid out, and you can certainly modify these in our report editor. So we've got some nice layouts here. And in your organization at the FAA, you might have reporting standards, you might have colors that you like. We have some basic templates here, but you can also create your own organizational templates here. And now we're ready to create a report. So I'm just going to call this Demo Rus report. You can put in a description, so if you pull this report up later, you'll know what you're looking at, or if you're sharing it with other Toad users. So here when I click finish, we've got our nice little report template. You can clean things up in here. It's ready to go at this point, but if you want to, we can add in charts and pictures, graphs, all sorts of things, all sorts of calculated fields. But we just want to preview this quickly in this tips and tricks, and you'll see that it will pull it up, and we can export this report out to many formats. You don't have to have our cute little Toad logo in there. You can remove that if you like, but here we can see the averages in there, the average quantity, and what formats can we get it out in? We can get it out in PDF, HTML, rich text, Excel file, comma delimited, and all these reports, just like with the exports, can be automated here. So real quickly, we've seen how you can connect, understand what's going on, build a query graphically, and we're going to go back to that graphical query builder. And on the query tab, many of you, before you do all that with the data, we've got the query here, you like it, but you're more comfortable or feel more productive working in the editor. You can right click here, say open in the editor, and we can come in here, and we've got our nice SQL statement. You'll see it brings along the previous data sets. You can come in here and modify your query. Many of you are very familiar with the editor. You can execute it. But a real nice feature in here that a lot of people are not aware of is if we go up to, I believe it's the view menu, yes, there's this SQL recall. Toad automatically saves your last 500 validly executed SQL statements to a small DAT file. So here, if I were to go ahead and execute this, I can come over here and I've got my SQL recall. I'm just going to thumbtack it out, and there we can mouse over, and there I can see all my recently executed SQL statements here. And if I had an empty editor or I wanted to build a script, I can double click on those. And what's nice is on any one of these, if I right click, one of the options I have here is moved to name SQL. So what happens when I do that? Well, I click that. We now have this name tab, and I'll just call this FAA Demo SQL, hit enter. And now anytime I pop this out, I can come find my SQLs by name. There's no limit to how many names that I can have here in my SQL recall. So it's just a nice way to go back, and if you've been typing things, go do other work, open up a new editor, and drag and drop load SQL on in to your window. I'm just going to thumbtack that out of the way. And what you'll see in the editor is we have the ability to optimize the statement, automatically optimize. Optimize kind of has a little more control. You'll step through what you want to do before you optimize. Auto optimize will generate that whole process as you go along in there. And so if we want to auto optimize, we just kind of click here to optimize the SQL statement. It will pull up your SQL optimizer here. There are some tabs, and most of the time you're going to be on the Optimize SQL tab. Sometimes you may want to scan SQL. And what we mean by scan is we want to scan through your code and find all your bad code. When we load a SQL statement in here, like with the first time you load a SQL statement in, it's going to have the SQL statement here. Actually, let me go back here to this one that I have saved. It's a little better looking. Is that we classify your SQL in one of three ways, whether it's simple, complex, or problematic. And this is based on a series of rules like the number of scan operations in your code. If it comes back, and you can see the classification right here, and it's on this little SQL information tab. If it comes back complex or problematic, that means that the Toad SQL Optimizer, Quest SQL Optimizer, will be able to find a better way, an optimized way to rewrite your SQL. So when you first load in your SQL statement, you'll click on Get Estimated Plan, and it will tell you, is it complex, problematic, or simple? Instead of combing through explain plans, trying to rewrite your code, wasting a lot of your valuable time, especially most of you are probably doing 10 things at once and rarely get to do anything uninterrupted. It's very nice where you can click on one button, comes back and tells you, okay, this is complex, so let's find a better alternative. So at this point in time in our optimizer, we can click on Rewrite. If you click on Rewrite, what that will do is we will find every single way possible to rewrite your SQL statement that's semantically equivalent to the original, which just means it's going to return the same data but give you a different execution plan. The SQL Optimizer is very similar to the SQL Optimizer in Toad for Oracle. So if you know one optimizer, it's very easy to use both. If some of you are just SQL Server people and this is just new to you, it's really nice. You can rewrite the code, you can find an index for this individual SQL statement, or you can rewrite an index together. And if you have a longer SQL statement, or it's the end of the day, going to lunch, you can click on Auto Optimize. And if you click on Auto Optimize, this will find every single way possible to rewrite your SQL statement. Then we'll rewrite all those rewrites, and then we'll test all of them for you, and then tell you which is the best code. So it can really, while that's doing that, you can be back in Toad for SQL Server Management Studio, email, really doing lots of multitasking, make yourself a lot more productive. But here we can see I have a session where I clicked Rewrite, and then once I got the rewrites, I came in here and I said, let's test run all. You may have large data sets, and that can take a long period of time. So when you do say test run all, we do give you the option to limit the rows retrieved. So you can say, bring back the first 10 rows, 50 rows, 100 rows, and find the best 2 or 3 tuning alternatives, and then test those against larger data sets. But in this case, I did test run all, and I was on level 2. And what I mean by that is we have 5 levels of intelligence for our optimizer. I would recommend when you first start evaluating this to be on level 2 or level 3. Level 2 will cap it off at about 1,000 rewrites. Doesn't mean we're always going to find that many, but there is that potential to find all those generated alternatives. Now, if you have a very critical piece of SQL or you didn't find enough at level 2 or level 3, you can amp it up to 4 or 5. But as you can see, we can generate thousands of alternatives, and that can take a lot more time. So that might be where it's more beneficial to do it at 5 o'clock at night, click your auto optimize, and come back in the morning when it's done. But you can set your different optimization level. So in this one, I was on level 2, and it found 20 different ways to rewrite this particular SQL statement. After I test ran them, it said 8 were faster than the original. And here we can see that this alternative, this one here, of the ones that I tested, was the fastest. It gets this cool little trophy here, and we can quickly see the magnitude of improvement. But we want to drill in more and understand a little bit more about what it did. We'd like some knowledge transfer. And this tool is very good with knowledge transfer. So here, if I click up on the Compare tab, we can see the original, and over here, I'm going to go find that best alternative. So I'm going to scroll down here and go find that one alternative here. And let's see, where is it? There it is with the little trophy. I select it, and now you'll see highlighted in green, like on the left side and on the right side is where it made changes in code. And this one, what it looks like it did is over here, there are parentheses around this, that these were all considered one clause or individual clauses. And over here, it removed those parentheses to make it an individual clause. So you as a seasoned developer, seasoned DBA, may look at this and go, oh yeah, that was something that I would have done. Or you might learn something new and say, that's pretty cool, I can add it to my arsenal. But as you see, there's very nice knowledge transfer. So we kind of went through this SQL Optimizer at a high level. As I mentioned, you can scan through your source code, your databases, to find all your complex or problematic code. And you can optimize just indexes here instead of the SQL. We've gone through this kind of fast. It's late in the afternoon for some people. So one of the nice things is if you come to the help menu, and on Toad World, there's also a nice video. But here you can come in here and it's going to walk you through like how to optimize your SQL, how to do different things in here, how to scan, but it'll basically walk you through all the steps to get the most out of this tool. So with that, I'm going to go back to Toad for SQL Server. Once again, a quick little review. We've saw how we can connect to one or many instances, how we can configure and customize your interface, understand the relationships, generate data diagrams, use those data diagrams to graphically build queries. We can take those queries into the editor, and then we can optimize that code. Some of the other things that are very nice in here, as I mentioned, especially if you're a DBA or developer, we can click on sessions, and you can come in here and get session information about the different connections in here, see what's going on. You can kill processes, you can monitor the session details. So a quick little way without jumping back and forth between various monitoring tools, SQL Server Management Studio. You can do some basic things right here in Toad for SQL Server. You can refresh, do a lot of other neat things. We also have some just pretty generic performance information we can start capturing here. And this is where it'll lead into our Foglight tool, the 24/7 monitoring tool that Susan's going to cover here in a little bit later. But we can get some CPU information, IO, memory, weights right here. And we'll come back to this later while it's capturing. And you can do hard refreshes here to try and get more information. We saw the discovery wizard. We can also look at some of your underlying storage. So here's just on my little laptop, I've got my various databases. I can see the file information. So once again, instead of having to navigate around sort of the complex environment in Management Studio, you have a lot of this information very quickly and easily at your fingertips. A few of the other really cool things here in Toad for SQL Server. We have a data generator that you can create data. Under Administer, there's some real nice things. We've got a job manager that'll allow you to see all your jobs, edit those, execute them, see if they've completed. It's a very nice little feature here. So if you have more than one server you're connected to, you can come in here. We can look at your calendar. You can look at all your jobs for a particular day, a work week, a month in here. So it's just a nice little tool there to help you be a lot more productive and stay focused. As I mentioned, in here under the Administer, there's a log reader. If we open up the log reader here, one of the things we can read your online transaction logs, backed up offline transaction logs. You can come in here, we can see DML, DDL, you can see the actual record data. We can create your redo SQL, your undo SQL here. This was a little alter table thing that maybe I want to undo. You click on the welcome, you just sort of walk you through. Do you need to uninstall the little components or install those the first time? Read that log. We can step through the little wizard here, as I mentioned. So it's got a nice little wizard. Do we want to do the online transaction log, your native SQL Server backup, or our Lightspeed from Quest backup file, or an offline transaction log? Can step through this. Once again, what kind of authentication, which database, and you just walk through the wizard, and just gonna cancel that, go next, okay, next. goes through the steps, and we're all ready to go. And we have our log once again, give you a summary of some of the commands, show you the files, statistics of what's going on, how many inserts, updates, lots of neat things here in the log reader. A few of the other tools in here before we get ready to open up for questions is the ability to, we have a bunch of different reports built in here, schema reports, data reports, but we can do compares. We can do a data compare between different databases. We can do a schema compare. So if I were to open up the schema repair, and once again, everything is wizard driven, I'll click next. And you just need to add your source and target. It's a little unclear right here, but if you click on the add, we're adding the source. I'm just going to grab this, and we'll grab my AdventureWorks database. I'll click OK. And then we need to add the target, and we do that. And now I'm going to come here and add AdventureWorks, data warehouse. And now we have a source and target. You can put in a description, and you want to put in a description here because this can be automated. So when I click next, we can just step through the wizard. You'll see the comparison objectives, step through here. It's now going through, and we can see all what's going on. So what's the source, what's the target, what's the same. So if you have your dev environment, your prod environment, quickly and easily, you can see those differences here. Gives you a quick high-level summary. So here we can see there's 130 objects that are in the source that aren't in the target. There's 38 objects in the target that aren't in the source. There's 66 identical objects. There's a couple objects that are the same object that should be the same, but one of the columns is different. We may want to drill down in. And when we hit finish, we come on in here, and you can actually drill down in, see that information, generate a sync script. So here on the tables, we can see all the ones that are in the source and target, and I think there was one or two things. Here we can see, this wasn't a very good example, but I'll just click on the database log, and you can see what's different on one side or the other highlighted in green. So very nice comparison tools, schema data compares in here, and we can generate that sync script that you can run immediately or open up in the editor. Now we've done all sorts of things in here, and a lot of things you may want to automate. So if we come to the tools menu, you'll see there's a little automation tutorial you can go back and look at in a little bit. And if I click on automation here, we have this nice sort of drag and drop GUI automation utility. Here, I'm just going to hide that so we get a little bit more room here. And I'll clear that out. There we go. So now, let me open up that automation utility again. Here, clicked it off. So on the far left side, we have a toolbox. The toolbox is divided into three categories: database activities, file activities, and system activities, where essentially you can set up like your Boolean logic, set it up to email, run custom programs, and run automation scripts within automation scripts. So you may be pulling data every day from your production to load some into dev, or maybe load into reporting, or doing both those things. And you don't want to manually do that. We can do all sorts of things. Maybe you're doing some ETL, transform and cleanse steps. So here we'd say, let's connect to the database. It takes your default database connection, but you can come in here and grab any one. If I had multiple SQL Server connections, you can put in names so we can see what that is. We'll just call this Quest SQL Server. And you'll see up here, I'm now saying I'm connecting to my Quest SQL Server. I want to execute a script, and I can manually put in my script here. Oops. Oh yeah, I do have a script, or nope, I just grabbed an object there. I can go back and grab a script from my editor or my query builder, load it in there, and then maybe I want to use that export template that we created earlier in this. So I can just go to my desktop, find my SQL Server export, and we've now saying connect to the database, run this script, then export that data. And then I can publish those files, copy that file, FTP them. I can say, if export fails, don't do this, or if export's successful, run a report, send that report in an email. And we can do all these. We can manually run this automation utility, or we can schedule it as we saw with the Windows Desktop Scheduler and manage it within here in the Job Manager. So we've been going about 45 minutes. I've covered most of the things I want to do. So Brianna, let's open this up for questions if anyone has questions. And when we're done with the questions, Susan will then take over the presentation to talk about Foglight to everyone.
Awesome. Do we have any questions from anybody? All right. Well, if you do have any questions, this whole session is recorded and we'll send it out following the tips and tricks. So it looks like we'll just go ahead and get started with the Foglight demonstration. And let me just make you a presenter real quick. All right, Susan, you should be the presenter.
Susan may be on mute. We're not hearing her.
Yes, I think she is. There we go.
Yeah, hi. Okay, give me 2 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So once again, if you have questions or want to ask things, you can send those to Brianna. You can also go to Toad World and ask more business questions to your the forum on Toad World. So lots of different options to get more information about getting more out of Toad for SQL Server.
Yes, I went ahead and put my email in the chat box, and I'm also going to go ahead and put that Toad World link in the chat box as well. Did you guys all find this useful? Do you think that you have learned something new that you guys can implement into your daily use for Toad?
Yes.
Looks like... Yes, awesome. That's great.
Is there anything else that you've seen that you'd want more information on, and just anyone on? We appreciate your time. We want to make sure you get the best use of today. Russ and Susan are, very valued resources. So anything you got for them now would be great.
Also, just want to let you guys make you aware that some of you are not muted. So just make sure to go ahead and mute if you want to be muted. Awesome. Susan, are you just about ready?
Yeah, another minute, please.
Okay.
So Susan will be covering the monitoring. The Toad for SQL Server is for your developers, DBAs, sometimes your technical analysts, data prep people. Foglight is your 24/7 monitoring tool that is heterogeneous. It will focus in on Toad for SQL Server, but can also monitor at the same time Oracle, Postgres, DB2, Sybase. Has a lot of functionality right out of the box, but can also be highly customized. We don't put anything server side. We have remote collectors, and Susan will go into all the details on this particular monitoring tool.
All right, I am going to go ahead and pull up the architecture here. Susan, let me know if you want me to go into the more detailed slide for this as well.
Okay, actually, my environment's coming up. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, almost there. Apologize for that. Too fast,
No
Russ. Okay, let's see. I can share. Okay, well, I'll just talk about this to start off with. So Foglight is a monitoring solution that is focused on monitoring, like Russ was saying. Toad does a lot of really great stuff, a little bit of monitoring, but this is what we're going to do for the deep dive. So what you're looking at on the screen is the architecture and allowing you to see that we monitor many different database platforms. So in that web-based console in the upper right side, you're going to be able to see all your databases, all the different types of databases, all the different instances on a single pane of glass. So you can very quickly understand what's happening in your database environment and where you need to focus the attention. And once you understand what the problem is, it's going to give you the ability to diagnose and resolve. Well, not all of the resolve, but tell you, analyze what that problem is, give you all the what we call dimensions with regard to that problem, like what user and what database and what SQL statement and you know, all the different what we call dimensions that are contributing to your performance issue. So in the architecture, before we move off of this, notice there's a Foglight management server sort of in the middle there, where there is a repository that maintains all the performance metrics. Okay, and so that's where we generate the baseline that helps you understand what is normal for your environment using all that historical data. And so we generate what we call deviation alerts, where you go outside of that baseline, then you would get an alert, as well as the normal alerts where you would have normal warning, critical, fatal, severity levels. For example, if your table space goes beyond a certain metric, okay. So I'm going to go into all of those rules. And so the repository on the Foglight management server also allows you to have all of that history you might not have otherwise. So you can go back in time as far as you need to understand where there were performance issues and again, the whole analytics in order to resolve those problems. And then notice that we don't have any agents on the servers. The agent manager, this with the red and green arrows, the agent manager would reside either on the Foglight management server or, depending on scalability, that is to say the number of agents or instances you're monitoring, you may have multiple Foglight agent managers, but not on your database servers, okay? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and switch to my lab. Or any questions with the architecture before we go on? Okay. Are you able to see my Foglight console?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. Okay, so this is the main dashboard where you would come in to view the first dashboard you would come into. And you can see that here are all the databases, types of databases I'm monitoring. And we even actually have one more, or a couple more, because just for the real estate. But so right now we're focused on all the instances. If I only wanted to see, let's see, we're doing SQL Server. If I only wanted to see SQL Server, I could click on this panel, and now I just see the SQL Server instances down here. So for each of these instances, I'm able to see if there are warning, critical, or fatal alerts, how many of each, how many instances I'm monitoring. So I get the big picture of my entire database environment. Now, having said this, we can customize these views to show only specific database instances. So if you are a dev person, for example, or if you are a production person, you may only want to see the production dashboards, or you may only want to see the dev test instances. So you can customize this to show the specific databases you want to see in this database in your dashboard. Now, having said that, Foglight, you would have a specific user when you log into Foglight, and you can see that I'm logged in as the DB admin. And so that user has privileges to see certain things and perform certain actions. Okay. So that user then could generate a specific dashboard that shows only those instances and make that their home page so that when they log in, they see specifically that group of databases. Or you can actually create a custom dashboard that shows specific metrics for a specific instance that you, that's really the main focus of your monitoring. So you could create that dashboard, and I'll show you that in a minute, and then make that your home page. Or you could put a bookmark on it so that you could get to that page very, very easily. And that would be under the bookmarks here. So very flexible solution in order to see just what you need to see and restrict the privileges of the users that log into Foglight. Okay, so for example, if you wanted to create an agent or you wanted to change the severity levels of a rule, that would be more of an administrative function. You could have sort of read-only users that just need to view metrics in the database and create one view of the metrics for them, and then that's all they see. Okay, so very flexible in terms of security roles. Okay, so let's get down to it. What I've done is I highlighted the SQL Server panel so that it only sees SQL Server instances here. And for each one of the instances that I'm looking at, I'm able to see the highest severity level alert, the name of the instance, the version, how long it's been up, the workload, and notice when I hover over this, I'm able to see that baseline. The baseline is that light blue area, and then the dark line is the actual metric. So all of the metrics that we collect are going to be, you would be able to see in this manner, the baseline, the actual metric against the baseline. Okay, so that's just the workload. That's having us understand how busy is this instance. Okay, and here we see the alarms. We see 1 fatal and we see 5 critical. We don't see any warnings, so that's the red, orange, and yellow. We see the OS host mission that the database is running on. Okay, so when we install a database agent, we also can monitor the OS. So here we can see the CPU, the memory, and the disk, so we can get very deep dive information about the operating system where that database is running as well. Okay. And oh, I did want to show you that. See, if we hover over this one, we can see that baseline as well. So we see when we are looking at graphs where the timeline, we are looking at a specific range in time. So you see at the top right here, by default, we're looking at the last 60 minutes. So again, with that, all the historical metrics in the performance in the repository, we're able to change that time range to whatever you want in terms of all of that historical data that we see. So right now I'm focused on calendar, so I can choose exactly the from date and time to date and time, or I could go on a timeline where I would be able to choose the last period of time, or I can stretch or contract this window here in order to allow me to see a specific range in time. Okay, so I can move back in history. Let's say yesterday or last week, the database was performing very, very poorly. So I want to see what that looked like. And here's the thing, we can run a compare. You can compare that performance to a different range in time. So let's say, you know, last week when it wasn't running so poorly, we want to compare what was happening then to what's happening now. And we do that in a dimensional fashion. What I mean by that is dimensions like user, database user, OS user, SQL statements, programs, packages, all types of levels of different dimensions, which I'll get to when we look at the Performance Investigator. Okay. Okay. Any questions so far on, you want to put that in chat or unmute?
I don't see any in the chat now.
Okay, thanks, Brianna. Okay, so let's drill down to some of these alerts and understand what these might be. So I'm just going to click right on top of this alarm right here, and I see that when it happened, I can see whether it's been acknowledged and cleared. So this is another advantage of having that role-based, the user account specific to each Foglight user, where this helps with collaboration. So if I see this problem, I could, as DB admin, acknowledge this, and then my user account would show up here. So the rest of the Foglight community can understand who's working on this, and you're also able to put notes to document what you might be doing about this particular issue. And when it's resolved, you could put the resolution also, and all of that information would be saved for this particular alert, how many times it happened, who acknowledged it, who was working on it, you know, what they were doing. So all that information can be kept with a specific alarm. So here we see that it's on this host, it's on this instance, and that this is the particular issue, that's the message, and where it originated from. So when I click on that message, I'm now able to see the particular alert. It has to do with connection time, and we see where it came from. That is to say, this is the parent, this is where it came from, and usability is the metric that we are looking at in order to understand that there's a problem with the connection time. Here's the actual metric that triggered this alert. It happened on this instance, and that's the actual metric. We're also able to see some history. So here we see over time, again, the last, let's see, about an hour. And we can see how that fluctuated over the last hour. And of course, you can go further back, but in this brief overview of the alert, we see the last hour. This is the things affected. Now, what I mean by this, in this case, it's the specific instance, but you're also able to see if you had set up different groups. Remember on the first screen, I was showing you that you can set up groups of databases for a specific dashboard. So you only wanted to see those databases. So that this list might include the different groups of databases that are affected by this specific alert, okay? And then here it's giving you a background on what this alarm really means. And then here are some suggestions to resolve this. Okay, so detect, diagnose, and resolve. And then here we can do the acknowledge, we can do the clear. And then here is where we see that history. So I was mentioning before, if this alert went off multiple times, you could see the various times it went off, how long it lasted, if it was acknowledged or cleared, and if there are any notes. And this is where you have that ability to create a note and put the documentation, put the notation that describes how you are responding to this alert, or perhaps if you've resolved it, what the resolution was. Okay, so all that, this information is saved in the Foglight repository. Okay, so let's get down to the diagnostics and understand how we can get to what exactly is causing this problem. What I'm doing now is drilling down to this specific instance. And 1 second. Okay, so I drill down to the specific instance. Now I can see the uptime, the HA, log shipping replication. Here we see the storage infrastructure. This is the OS information. And then also we can see instance information in terms of the resource usage breakdown. We're going to get in detail into that. The throughput, and also, oops, and also the sessions, active and blocked. We're going to talk about blocking sessions too. Let me see if I can get to that. Yeah, that might be separate. And then on the right side, we're able to see, just on this overview screen, we can quickly understand what alarms are happening in this time range and also the top 10 SQL. Okay, so this is just a quick overview of what's happening in the instance. The real meat of this, and what I'd like to get to, is the SQL PI. We call this the SQL Performance Investigator. This is where we get that dimensional analysis. So you see that on the left side here. We can see the SQL statements, the T-SQL batch jobs, what databases are running, all again in the time range. So again, we're looking at the last 60 minutes. We could change this to whatever we want. And I may change that depending on what we see here, but what I wanted to show you is in this time range, this is the breakdown of the resource consumption. So you see that on the right side here, so much CPU logs. So we're basically doing a weight analysis. Okay, so you're able to understand what resources are taking the heavy hit here. And so seeing that, I can then look at, I can go to the activity highlights, and I'm able to see what is contributing to these, the heavy hitters in terms of the dimensions on the left side that are contributing to that resource usage. Okay, so here's the highest SQL statement in terms of the deep database time, the T-SQL batch jobs, databases, programs, and users. You see it goes down the list of these dimensions. So we see the heavy hitters here in the activity highlights. Let me see if I have any blocking history. Okay, yes, so we saw that alert on the blocking history, remember? So here I'm able to see in this time range, and this is, it'll tell you when that event started in terms of the blocking, the FIDs that are involved in blocking. So I can see who it's being blocked by, that's that secondary one here. And here, this is, I'm sorry, the bottom one is the blocked, and the top session is what's causing the blocking. You see, this is the program that that session is running to cause the block. And then we actually see the users blocking and blocked, as well as the SQL text. Okay, so this gives you a very quick analysis of, thorough analysis of blocking locks that are happening, again, in this time range. Okay. So from here, let's do that dimensional analysis. So let's say I want to see all the SQL statements that are running during this time range. I want to see which one is the heavy hitter. We saw that one in the activity highlights, but here, when I click on SQL statements, now I get that whole list of SQL statements, all the SQL statements that were running in this time range. Okay, and as I scroll to the right, you're able to see all of the rest of the metrics. Now, the one metric that everybody mostly cares about is the, the active time, right? The users start complaining if the system is slow, so SQL statement is slow. So you want to understand what SQL statement is the slowest. That by default, it's sorted on the active time. But notice that all the other performance metrics are there to the right. So you can sort by CPU, for example, because we saw a high CPU percentage there. So we just click on the header, and now this list is sorted by the CPU. So whatever you need, number of executions and so forth, you can sort by that particular metric. So we can actually put more metrics on this chart by changing this particular chart, but in this case, we just see those that are there. And so this kind of relates back to Russ's demo where he did the SQL tuning lab. So here we found a bad SQL statement now or in the past, wherever you find this bad SQL statement, you could take it and send it to the tuning lab. Okay, so as long as you have Toad or the SQL Optimizer installed on your desktop, wherever you're running this web browser interface to Foglight, you can click on Tune SQL, and that would send the SQL statement to the tuning lab. So, rewrites of the SQL statement, get a better SQL statement, and then you go ahead and you put it back in production, right? So sometimes when you put it back in production, it's not running as well as when you tune that SQL statement in your dev environment. So Foglight has this very unique and very valuable capability that will run a compare. Okay, so I could take that SQL statement, let's just grab this one right here. We run a compare, and so this feature is allowing you to compare the same or different dimensions in the same or different time ranges. So as an example of that, let's say that you tune the SQL statement by adding an index, and right, so you can rewrite the SQL statement, but let's say it's a third-party app and you can't rewrite the SQL statement, you might put an index in there. Okay, so we could take that same dimension, the SQL statement, and yeah, that's what you see here on the upper left. This is the SQL statement in the time range when it was running poorly, and then we could compare it to that same dimension, which is the same SQL statement, after we put the index in. Okay, so let's just say that was the day before, for example, okay, just for demo's sake. And so I run this compare. Oh, shoot, that was not a good example. Okay, let me just modify that. And let's take, I don't know if this one will work. Let's do, excuse me, oh, sorry, that's same dimension in different time range. Yeah, so let's just take that. Oh, I get some video. Okay, there we go. Sorry, demo stuff. Okay, so what you're seeing here, this is a SQL statement in this time range, which is the blue. That's the blue line there. So the reason I didn't get it was probably that there was no data during that time range, so it didn't make sense. And then this time range, though, we do see that there is some data here. So basically, you're going to get the blue line for the top and the gray for the bottom. And in this case, it's the same dimension, different time ranges. And the made-up scenario was before and after we added an index. Okay, so along with that, you get all the execution statistics, and then dimensionally, you're able to look at the different types of dimensions that will give you information on each of those. For example, the T-SQL batch jobs, the databases, the programs, and so forth. Okay. Now, what I want to explain to you is on the right side here. Now, in this case, we don't have any, but this is what we call change tracking. So there are things that happen in your database that could be causing performance issues in these categories. Maybe there was a database configuration change, or a database object was changed. Execution plan, master configuration. So all of these are types of changes that happen in your environment that could cause performance degradation. Now we have a last category here called user defined. So if there's a change in your environment that could happen that is different, that is not automatically detected by Foglight, you can actually add that user defined, note that user defined change in the environment. So when I go to change tracking, I'm able to see, let me do this. Oh, okay, let's clear those. Let me close that. Okay, so the categories for change tracking are these here. So let me change the time range so we can see some of those changes. Let's do the last 7 days. So these are the different categories identified by the different colored dots. And so here you can see, in fact, here's one of the user defined here. So we can see, so basically what we're seeing is where on the timeline this happened, and if there is excessive resource consumption right after a change in the environment, then we could deduce that that change in the environment could cause performance degradation. So this is a really nice way to look at the performance of your database from that event's perspective. Okay, so here we can see that here this log grew excessively. And, here we can see that a new plan, execution plan was found. So maybe you tuned a SQL statement, and this would, make it very clear that you changed the execution plan. So yeah, so this is a very useful way to have a different perspective of understanding performance issues in your database. Okay, and then also we have the advisories, which this is looking at your database as a whole and saying, here we see excessive IO weights, here's some log weight deviation. So don't think I mentioned so the alarms, I think I did. Yeah, so the baseline deviation, that's what these are right here, deviating from the norm in terms of norm the baseline. Okay, so each of these are a narrative, a narrative on what you can do to resolve an issue. It's recognized that there are objects experiencing block weights, tells you when it happened, gives you some information on the line there. But here, it gives you a report on that particular issue. So here's the actual metrics. It describes what it's looking for here, and then gives you the actual metrics that identify that there is a problem. It shows you the specific objects that are involved in this issue. You can see the two locked objects there. Gives you the key metrics that say this actually really is a problem, and then it gives you the recommendation on how to resolve it. Okay. And then you can actually even go to that. This is a link to go to that screen in the Performance Investigator to show you that was a blocking issue. So it came right to the screen to show you that blocking history. Okay. Okay, so let me give you another scenario where, let's say, a lot of shops have one user that they dread because they're doing random rogue things that cause issues in the database. So this is the one I like to show in terms of the dimensions. So you can find that user. First of all, you would go to the time range when you see a performance issue. Then you would find that user under users here, and let's just say it's this QSC user. And then maybe you know they're always in this one program that they're just messing around and causing havoc. And so then you could go to that program. And so now in that program, what databases are they hitting? Because you know it's a particular database, for example. And then you could click on SQL statements. And now I'm going to see all the SQL statements that user was running in this time range, running this program, and be able to understand in this database. So you can see it gets a very granular down to a very, very specific thing. If you have ideas that you want to get that deep to see a particular issue, you have that capability with this dimensional analysis. Okay. Otherwise, I could just look at this and go, oh, there's that. Let me close that. The QSC user. I highlight that user, and now I'm able to see how that user is performing against, you know, what that user is doing against all the other. Hang on. Get back to my analytics. So I can see how that user is performing against the other. Oh, sorry. Focus on the wrong thing. Okay, so you can see, so I'm highlighting users, now I can see the top users, just like we did with the SQL statements, in this case, sorted by the CPU usage. So here's my user list. I can scroll to the right and select any one of these. You know, maybe I want to see the user that is running the most executions in this time range, so I would sort by that. Okay. Okay, and the other thing I want to cover here is, just out of the way. With this panel that's like right in my way. Okay. Any questions so far while I pause?
Does this look like something you all would be able to implement in your environment? Do you see use for it? Is there any use cases for it at all? Some of you are on mute. I think you're all self-muted at this point for the most part. All right.
Okay, so the other one, the other compare I want to show you is that you can actually compare instances. So let's say everything was running great in dev and then you went to production and it was not running so great. You can actually run a compare between two different instances. So what I would do is I would go to the instance that I want to compare against some other instance. So let's say it's this, you know, this SQL 2008 instance. So I'm in instance view, and now I can hit this compare, and it will allow me to select a different instance that I can compare to. So I'm on this instance in this time range. I want to compare to another instance. I would just select which instance that is. And then, let's see, that's the same one. So I'm going to do this one. And then I can compare them and be able to understand not only the performance. So again, the blue is the one on the top, gray is the one on the bottom. I can see those different statistics, performance statistics. Also, I can see if there were different changes in the environment. That's that change tracking. But I can also see the difference in, okay, sorry, that was the configuration. Here we see the different metrics with regard to all those different dimensions. And then maybe it's a different configuration between the two different, the prod and the dev. So I can get a comparison of dev and prod right here, or those two different instances that we were selected in our compare. Okay, so that's a really cool feature too. Okay, so that's the Performance Investigator. I wanted to show you some of the rules. A lot of times when customers install a monitoring solution, they are barraged with alerts and they just kind of want to ignore the whole thing. So we don't want that to happen. What we've done with Foglight is that we are able to set this up when you install a agent. So there's one agent per instance. So I'll select this one and we're going to look at the alarms, configure alarms for this specific instance. Now I could have selected multiple instances or agents, and then we would be looking at how those are set up, because what I might want to do is change something. I might want to change. So we have a global setup, then we can get more and more detailed per instance, per user, per table space, you know, so we can get that granular. So I could have selected multiple instances. You see on the right side that I've just selected the one, that's the selected agent. But all these rules, if I were to change them, I could apply them to multiple ones at a time. Now, when I say change them, actually skipping ahead of myself, first let me get to the sensitivity level. What this means is that we have in our setup 3 different levels, which are essential, normal, tuning. Oh, actually 4, and performance, where this tells the agent for that instance which rules and severity levels we want active. Okay, so you can see that essential has very few things checked in terms of fatal and critical and the various rules. You can see there are quite a few here. And then if you go to normal, you'll see that more are selected. You go to tuning, all are selected. And so the point here is that you want to define which sensitivity level you want when you install the agent. And then from there, you can go in and fine tune. And you can say, okay, for this particular metric, I only want it to be emailed to this one person, not the global, you know, everybody in Foglight or something like that. So this is where you're able to, so tuning means you want to set them all on because you want to see what will go off, okay? And then you come down from there. So you can set your own normal and essential templates, but you can always go to restore settings to set it back to what we think is industry standard in terms of what alerts are essential or normal in that respect, okay? All right, so next we want to go to the actual alerts, and that would be these here. So these are all the alarms, these are all the rules. You see they're categorized on the left side here. There's CPU, logs, SQL statistics. If we go down far enough, you'll be able to see those deviation rules. Replication, there's a lot of rules. Disk, there's the baseline deviation. Okay, so all of these, you would not be setting a threshold because it goes off the baseline. But if you were looking at something like disk space, or let's just do this, disk queue length, these have severity levels set. So this is where they're all set out of the box. So, you know, there's defaults. Yeah.
Are you moving anything on the screen? Because it looks like it may be frozen.
Oh, what are you seeing? Yes, I've been moving a lot of things.
You're on resource consumption, and then the top bar is just highlighted in blue, and then that's kind of where we're at.
Oh my goodness.
I see the
That
mouse
was
on
a long time
configuration.
ago.
Yeah. Uh-oh.
Oh wow, that was a long time ago. Do you see my screen now?
Yes.
Oh,
But now it
well,
says alarm status.
yes,
Administration
yes,
SQL Server. Yeah.
yes. Oh my gosh, you have not seen a lot of stuff. These are the sensitivity levels. Thank you for saying something, Brianna. I'm going to go over stuff, but if you need me to cover it again, I can do that. So sorry. So these are the different severity levels. You can see the different rules and how more and more are selected if you go to tuning from normal and essential. Okay. And so now it was going to the actual rules. So I'm selecting this, I'm going to go to the settings, and now I see all the different rules. What I was talking about with the baseline, that is these deviation rules. So if it goes outside that baseline, then it was throw an alert. But if we were on something like this one, for example, where I'm showing you the thresholds, normal, warning, critical, and in this case, there's only the normal and the critical. If I wanted to edit those or add a different level, I could set it up to have a warning and critical. Okay. And then for this particular rule, you see that we are not sending any emails. Oh, there we go. For critical, we're sending an email, not for warning. Okay. And so these are all variables that are set up on a global level. That is to say, who is the default DBA that all of the SQL Server alerts go to. But you can customize this and say you want it to go to different individuals for specific rules. Okay. Okay, so let's see now. We can look at these various rules, and I just want to show you that if we are not collecting a specific metric that maybe you like to run scripts on your own, if we're not collecting that, you can actually create user-defined collections. And so you can put that script in here, or that SQL query, or whatever you're running in order to capture metrics, and have Foglight capture those so that, oops, sorry, I went to the wrong thing. User-defined collections. So that you can have Foglight run that script periodically. And so you can see here that you would set it up to run on a specific agent. You would specify the offline frequency, online frequency, and real-time frequency. So any of the collections that Foglight is doing will be timed. So if it's offline, that means nobody is on the GUI to see. If somebody is on the GUI, but they're not on that dashboard, then the frequency of collection might be less. But if you are online, real time, that is to say you're looking at that dashboard, you might want the frequency of running that query or refreshing more frequent. So you can set those various levels of collection frequency, okay, and then a timeout level. So anyway, when you set these up, then you can go to one of the dashboards, which is under a specific instance, and it will show you that metric. Okay, but just know that you can create custom dashboards to present the metrics, any of the metrics that Foglight is collecting in any manner that you want to. So, for example, if I go back to my databases dashboard, I could choose to create a custom dashboard. And what I'm going to do is just open one that has been generated and show you how you can just drag and drop metrics onto a dashboard to view that particular metric. So let me just do the CPU one here. So here you can see somebody put up here a spinner to show response time. Here we can see a list of hosts. But if I want to see something particular, and then I can change, let me just close this. I can
see register subscription, Smiley Sands.
Sorry. I can.
You want to see these deals? See register subscription. Orange County register 168.
The wrong button here. Okay, sorry. So this is a custom dashboard where somebody has created a few things in there. This is a dual column view. You could create 2 columns, you could create 1 column. In this case, we just have 2 columns. I'm going to select a specific instance. Okay, so we want SQL Server, we want to look at the instances, and so I'm going to choose this instance right here, and now I see all the metrics that are collected for this instance. So I'm interested in, let's say, the buffer cache, let's say the reads. So I can drag this over and drop this in this clear space, select which metric I want, and notice how I can change how it looks, whether I want a line graph or a bar chart, spinner. So I'll just leave it as a line graph. I can put the labels, I can put titles and so forth. I'll just leave it blank for now. And then boom, I see that graph right there on my dashboard. And then maybe I also want to see right on top of that the buffer pages, the free buffer pages. So I can just drop that right on top of there, and now I see both of those metrics in that graph. So I can be very creative in making these new dashboards. Once I get it the way I like it, I can make this my home page. Okay, so if I make this my home page, when I log in, dbadmin, I will see this page. Okay, or I could put this as a bookmark. When I do that, I go under bookmarks on the left side here, and I would see that particular dashboard that I created right there. So if I click on that, I would go to that dashboard. Okay, so that's the way you might set it up for manager, where you only want them to see certain metrics in a certain manner. You could create that dashboard, give them that account, assign that account to a certain group who only has the role to see this dashboard. Because when we create a dashboard, we can see who has access to it. So if I look at the basic properties, I would see which roles are allowed to see this dashboard. So that role would be assigned just to that user, and then only that user could see the dashboard. But the administrators could see it, so that's where you have that separation of duties and privileges. Okay. Okay, so so that's the custom dashboards. And then it's going to take some time to show you that one. Go back to the main databases dashboard. And it's going to show you a little bit more per agent. How are we doing, Brianna?
Doing good. I don't believe I see any questions. I did want to ask, though, I don't know if you all heard me before, and I'd appreciate if just even one of you could give us some feedback. I'm really curious if you could see this as a use case in your environment, see if it's something that you could use on a daily basis. I know some of you may be on mute from me, so I am just going to unmute whoever is on mute from me. But Siobhan, Raymond, Vinu, Angela, do you guys have any feedback for us?
Yeah, any FAA end users, if you have feedback. This is the product you don't have today. What we showed you first, you do have that product. So do you see any, what do you like about this product? What do you see? That's
Alrighty, no problem. So we'll go ahead and send this out after as well, so you can always review it in case you were multitasking at all. And then Susan, did you have anything else that you were wanting to add?
No, I was just going to show this last report, and then we can wrap up after that.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, so Foglight has a lot of out-of-the-box reports, so I was just going to run one of them to show you. But you can always create custom reports, which is what I was showing you, similar to the way you were creating the dashboards. But this is an out-of-the-box report, kind of nice for, it's called the executive summary. And so this one will allow you to, and so all of the reports you can schedule to run on a regular basis and have them emailed out. So this might be one you could use for your weekly meetings to show how a specific instance is running. Here's the workload, the number of sessions. Here's the OS statistics. Here you can see the CPU memory and disk. And then it gives a report on the database in terms of the workload on that. And then here we see the, did Oracle instead of SQL Server. But in terms of the metric breakdown, you get a nice summary there too. So this is just one of the reports, and you could certainly do a proof of concept and try out some of the others. We'd love for you to do that. So I hope this has been helpful. If you do have any other questions, I can certainly, Vince can pass the, or not Vince, sorry. Brianna can pass those on if you think of anything later.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Susan. This was a great demonstration. And like I said, we will go ahead and all of these, the tips and tricks for Toad, as well as the Foglight demo, will be sent out following this webinar. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. My email is in the chat box, and I can direct you to Susan or Russell. But with that, thank you guys so much, and I hope you all have a great day.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Thank you.